And they're not going to be beating them up or anything like that. They will physically restrain them by the use of handcuffs.
Kevin, between 10 and 20 really isn't a lot, but should we get carried away with that and use that as a marker of success for this scheme? I mean, this does have to start somewhere.
Yes, I mean the enforcement people started yesterday. I don't have the exact numbers, but my understanding is that a significant number have been detained. But it is early days, and so this is only day two. So if your figure of 20 is correct, I think that's a jolly good start.
Are the problems looming, though? Because the Times is reporting this figure of between 10 and 20 and has also identified where these individuals have been detained. And it's in places where it is easy to find them. So it's when they've gone to wherever it is they're meant to be reporting to in order to get their weekly allowance, or it's just people who the Home Office has already housed in hotels so they know where they are. The big problem is finding all of these other people, and already we know that 2,500 people who could be on this list have simply disappeared into our society.
No, I'm sorry, I have got to correct you there. Nobody has disappeared. This is a mistake that the Times made on was it yesterday? 5,700 people were told that they were liable for removal because their claims were inadmissible. That group was then subdivided into Group A, which was 2,000, and Group B, which was 3,700. Now, Border Force have only been really concentrating on Group A, the first 2,000. And those people are all incredibly closely monitored. They're all on immigration bail. And my sources tell me that the Home Office know exactly where they all are. So it's a little bit of a mystery, this one. Forget the people in Group B for the moment. They're not of any real interest.
Okay, so why are they not of any real interest? Is that just a group that the Home Office is then going to get to? They're not people who've been lost in a system.
No, they haven't been lost in the system at all. They will eventually be got round to, but not yet. And we want to detain the people that we want to remove to Rwanda. So you can't detain 5,700 people. That isn't possible. So that is why they've subdivided the groups into two, and then they're going after the first group, and they will detain as many of those people as they want to detain for removal.
Okay, right. Well, it's good to have cleared that up with your expertise. Next question, which demands your experience too, Kevin, is about how these people who are then detained are treated and then taken to wherever it is that they're going to leave this country from and then be processed to Rwanda. So the Home Office has increased detention capacity to more than 2,200 places and has 500 highly trained escorts ready. That seems like a lot of escorts to me, but perhaps it's not enough. What does it seem like to you?
Right. Well, let's assume, for the sake of argument, that a flight out of the UK has a capacity of, say, 300 people. That will be 100 migrants and 200 detention officers, because the Home Office are going to play it safe, and they're going to send 2 detention officers with each person to be removed. And this seems to me to be highly sensible, because we want to make sure that everybody on that plane is safe and that they get to Rwanda safely, and they embark and they disembark safely. Now, unfortunately, some people will be difficult about leaving, and force, unfortunately, may have to be used. But these detention officers are very good. They do this sort of thing all the time, so they're well used to it, and they act very professionally, and it shouldn't be a problem at all.
What is the ultimate level of force that can be used in that situation?
People will be handcuffed.
And that's the most that an escort officer can do.
Yes, they can. I mean, they're not going to be beating them up or anything like that. They will physically restrain them by the use of handcuffs.
Right. So just on the point of that balance between the number of escorts and the number of detainees, 500 isn't actually an awful lot, is it?
Well, if you are, it depends on how many planes you are going to send off at one go. So if you're sending off a plane, I don't know, a plane a day, then it would be more than enough. If you're sending off 2 planes a day, it won't be enough. But we'll have to wait and see how many planes are going to go at any one time.
So aside from the actual numbers of people who would be removed from this country, Kevin, the other whole point of this policy is the message that it sends out to the criminal gangs who are taking so much money from vulnerable people, and we know the tragedy that can ensue from that. So you have met many people who want to come and live in this country. Do you really believe that this policy is going to send enough of a message to the gangs who are really kind of controlling this business at the moment?
Well, the gangs are controlling everything at the moment. They're controlling the amount of information that the migrants are getting, because they're telling them that nothing's going to happen. Everything is just going to be brushed under the counter. It's quite safe to go to the United Kingdom. Nobody's ever going to be removed, and it won't happen to them, which is unfortunate, because these people are being misled, at least perhaps until we have a general election. So that is unfortunate. But I do know that there is a feeling in northern France amongst the migrants that they are concerned, because they are hearing that people are going to be removed. And once the planes actually go, that will be very visual. It's very visual to see an aeroplane taking off. And if you can see an aeroplane taking off if you see an aeroplane taking off and told that there are migrants in it, then the people that want to come to the UK will see that it is actually happening.
But let's just put ourselves in the mind of somebody who's made presumably a very perilous journey from a far-flung place that they fear for their life in, or whatever it is, or that they just want to come to a different country to have a better economic future. If you've made that journey and got as far as Calais, are you really, if you see a picture of one plane taking off, going to be able to piece together that policy and that deterrent, or actually think, do you know what, I am going to pay this bloke over here $4,000 or whatever horrendous amount of money it is. I'm just going to take the chance that it might not be me that ends up on that plane.
Well, that's the balance. That's the risk that they will have to consider to take. Now, the Home Office can play this really well to their advantage, because if people do that and they are removed very, very quickly, that sends an even bigger message. So that means that if they are removed, then their mates will say, blimey, he only went across the other day and he's already on a plane to Rwanda. So that would be a very, very big deterrent.
Kevin, it's good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Kevin Saunders is former UK Chief Immigration Officer for the UK Border Force.
Dings, lots of dongs in the house, and the government trying everything it can to make an impression with its Rwanda deportation policy.
Yes, that's right. I think, that there was a lot of back and forth today about immigration, and there will be over the coming days because, as you mentioned, we're going into those local elections. And it's one of the issues that the Conservative Party really does want to talk about. And if you think back, John, over the last week or so, there have been a number of pretty big hitting policies that the Tories have announced, perhaps aimed at showing that Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, is doing something and is delivering something which those Tories who are out on the doorstep will be keen to repeat. But I have to say, what's really interested me today is that after Prime Minister's questions, we always get a briefing with both parties from the government and from the Labour Party. And it really is not yet clear to me how Labour is going to tackle this Rwanda plan if it gets into government. We know that Keir Starmer has promised that he will scrap it. He has reaffirmed that he will scrap it, despite some briefing to the contrary yesterday. But there is a much bigger question about what happens to all of those people who are in hotels around the country at the moment or who are detained if they're not going to be sent to Rwanda. I think at the end of the day today, we've finally got to the bottom of the fact that Labour says they will be allowed to claim asylum if they have the right to do that, which obviously the government is not allowing people who arrived here illegally to do. But I think that then does open up another question about what happens to them in the meantime and what happens to that hotel bill, which is currently pretty high and is likely to keep getting higher.
Right, so questions, as it were, lying in wait for Labour. Meanwhile, the test of the policy itself is how many asylum seekers can be flown off to Rwanda, how many will be staying there, and will it be a deterrent? Will it stop the boats, which is the Prime Minister's ultimate promise?
Yeah, that is the absolute proof of this policy, whether it works or not. And just in the last couple of months, we've seen more people arrive here on small boats as the Rwanda plan has gone through Parliament than arrived here last year before that. So just on the numbers alone, it looks like people are still arriving here. But around the edges, we're starting to see talk of some people, for example, going to Ireland to avoid being deported to Rwanda. And the government says that they are seeing a shift in behaviour, and actually that the number of people coming here across the channel now are from Vietnam, and that they are often unfortunately preyed on by people traffickers because they are from further afield, and the government has a plan in place to try and stop that from happening. But you're right, the proof will be in whether this policy stops the boats. I've had a briefing from those within the Home Office today, just on the early stages of that operation. It's called Operation Vector, this plan to deport people, to detain people and then deport people.
Yes.
It won't say at the moment how many people have been detained so far or how many are in the first cohort that the government is going around and knocking up doors today and the rest of this week. There are 800 officers working on that plan, though, which is a fairly significant number. So we have to think it could be in the hundreds, but at the moment we just don't have a firm number for how many have been detained yet.
Let's say hello, welcome to the programme now to Kevin Foster, Conservative MP, a former immigration minister. Welcome to you, Kevin.
Good evening, John.
Hi. So an asylum seeker then has volunteered to fly to Rwanda with a cheque for £3,000 of taxpayers' money in his pocket. What does that prove?
Well, it proves that we now have a different way to doing voluntary returns. And for those listening, we've actually had a system of voluntary returns for a long period of time. But as Matt pointed out, this is the first time someone's gone back to a third country, but rather than gone back to their country of origin. But usually under that scheme, it's where people have been declined, they don't have a status to be here, but they accept the point that they now need to leave. And it's been a way that the government can support them to leave. Rather than only being able to remove people via the enforced process, then potentially have, for example, have to use charter aircraft and other things. So whilst there is money usually paid as part of that, it's normally done in a way to facilitate, literally leaving the country and basic expenses when someone arrives, rather than having to just put them through the full deportation process and bring them into detention.
Okay, but surely, Kevin, voluntary resettlements, volunteers with £3,000 cheques in their wallet of taxpayers' money, that is not the way to stop the boats, is it? You don't claim it's the way.
No, and
you don't even claim it's the way to stop the boats.
No, and no one ever did. As we said, the core of the Rwanda plan is dealing with those who we can't return to their home country, either because the home country is a government we can't deal with, or a place where they just, as a matter of policy, refuse to accept enforced migration returns. That's the core of the Rwanda policy, hence the bringing into detention of those to go down that track, if I can put it that way, that we've seen this morning. The voluntary returns is an additional to the core of the Rwanda plan, and reflects the system that we've had across migration for some time. We've always had a system where that you can have a voluntary return, and also at the same time been enforcing returns.
And I suppose the truth is, Kevin, that you don't know and I don't know, no one knows precisely when a plane's going to take off, and maybe more importantly, when and if it does, how many deportees are going to be aboard?
Well, first, it would be rather daft to be giving out detailed operational
No, but I suggest you don't know the answer to that, not that you're keeping it discreet.
No, and I wouldn't expect to be briefed. I'm a former minister, not the current one. But certainly, we know that people have been brought into detention. You can only do that where you've got a reasonable prospect of their removal. So that tells me that, as we've heard recently, there are planes due shortly, because you can't just bring people in the hope of removing them. And it's also worth noting that the scheme isn't capped at 2,200 detention capacity. What you would do is bring people into detention ahead of a flight for them to be on. Then, of course, once they've been on a flight, you've got that detention capacity to use again. So just having a detention capacity doesn't mean the whole scheme is capped at that level.
Yeah, I mean, look, you don't believe, do you? Because I'm not sure anyone really does, that the boats can or will be stopped by election time.
Well, look, we need to get the Rwanda plan going. We need to have that as part of a suite of measures, by the way. This isn't the only thing that's being done. We can talk about the Albania deal. We can talk about work being done to return to places like Vietnam, where we do have a direct returns route to the country concerned. So it's not just about Rwanda, but it's certainly Rwanda is a big part, and particularly about breaking that business model where someone who's been in a safe and democratic country, they could have claimed asylum. In some cases, actually, where they even had legal status, pays a trafficker to bring them to the UK, and then because we can't remove them, they end up staying there.